Hey guys, tonight we begin where all very loud, very dysfunctional family dinners begin on Mount Olympus. The clouds are pink with the afterglow of a mythical sunset. And the air smells faintly of laurel leaves and divine ego. You're standing at the edge of an impossibly ornate marble terrace, watching a dozen immortals argue about who moved the golden armchair. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes up here. Not because they'd smite you on sight, though that's a possibility, but because someone would rope you into judging a godly bake-off or eating a lightning throwing contest, both of which tend to end in lawsuits, mortal lawsuits. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you feel like it, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully across the Olympian courtyard, where the marble doesn't just shine, it glows faintly from all the divine footprints polished into it over the centuries. Zeus is nearby, trying to adjust the height of his throne by summoning different kinds of clouds. One puffy cumulonimbus makes it too high, so he swaps in a soft cirrostratus, which makes him sink awkwardly. He scowls like a thundercloud himself. Around him, the rest of the pantheon is not particularly invested in anything practical. Apollo is playing a lyre, but every few notes, he glances over to see if anyone noticed. No one does. Ars is oiling his spear in a weirdly sensual way that makes even the war banners look away. Athena is pretending not to judge them all by aggressively polishing her helmet. And Hera is quietly arranging a vase of peacock feathers in the corner, her version of cold fury. When she's mad, she doesn't yell. She just decorates something passive-aggressively. You sit on a nearby bench, which is also gold, everything is gold, and try not to make eye contact with Hades. Yes, he's visiting. No, he's not enjoying it. He's wearing his signature black chiton and sipping something that suspiciously resembles burnt coffee. His presence is the mythical equivalent of your cousin showing up to Christmas in a trench coat and refusing to participate in group photos. Historians still argue whether Mount Olympus was imagined as a physical palace above Thessaly or more of a metaphorical divine realm accessed by the gods through mystical means. Either way, the vibes are objectively chaotic. It's a strange mixture of splendor and sibling drama. You wander past the feasting hall, where ambrosia and nectar never run out unless Dionysus drank it all last night, which he probably did. He's still asleep under the table. Surrounded by empty amphorae and a very confused goat, someone's drawn vines on his face and grape juice. It's not the first time. There's something deeply peaceful about watching immortals be deeply unimpressive. Now you're crossing the gallery of divine achievements. There's a bust of Hermes made entirely of winged sandals. A tapestry woven by Athena showing her defeating Poseidon in a very tactfully edited version of the story. And a weird clay sculpture Hephaestus insists is abstract but looks suspiciously like Zeus falling off his throne. Then there's the room of mortal offerings, filled with tiny clay pigs, olive branches, and badly spelled prayers. One particularly endearing tablet reads, "Dear gods, PLZ fix my brother. He is very loud. Also bring figs." You pause at a balcony where Artemis is feeding a silver deer. She doesn't talk much, just gives you a small nod, and disappears back into the forest that somehow exists up here. It's got owls that blink in Morse code and trees that hum lullabies when the wind gets bored. Farther along, you pass Hermes giving a tour to some confused newly dead souls who took a wrong turn on the way to the underworld. He's telling them that Olympus is just a VIP preview room, and then hands out pamphlets that are actually just napkins with doodles. Meanwhile, Hephaestus clanks by with a wheelbarrow of freshly forged gadgets. One looks like a bronze umbrella that stabs people if they talk too loudly. He winks at you. You decide not to ask. You realize something: immortality doesn't mean maturity. It just means having centuries to develop increasingly elaborate grudges. Like the time Poseidon salted all of Athena's olive trees out of spite, or when Hera made a cow out of pure resentment. Long story, we'll get there. Above it all, the wind carries gentle harp music, the smell of pomegranate wine, and the occasional shout of "Stop touching my lightning bolts" from Zeus. Standard Tuesday, really. But for now, you're just strolling, letting the petty squabbles wash over you like distant thunder. The clouds roll slowly beneath your feet, cushioning each step like memory foam made of mist. There's nothing urgent, nothing loud, just divine nonsense at a drowsy pace. This is Olympus at rest, bickering, brilliant, and endlessly strange, and you, for reasons never fully explained, have a backstage pass. Now that you've had your fill of passive-aggressive thunder gods and harp solos, it's time to travel a little further back to when Olympus wasn't even a thing yet. And the gods were just tiny divine infants with a flair for melodrama, and none had a more theatrical entrance than Zeus, baby escapee and future sky wielder. You find yourself suddenly on the island of Crete. It smells like thyme and goat sweat. The air is warm, but the cave you're in is cool and echoing like a divine refrigerator. In the gloom, there's a stone cradle. In it lies a baby, wrapped in swaddling cloth embroidered with tiny THUNDRBOLTS. His name, Zeus. His hobbies? Crying and avoiding being eaten by his dad. You crouch beside the cradle, and honestly, he's cute in that slightly terrifying way babies sometimes are. Big eyes, alarming lung capacity, and a forehead that radiates "I will grow up to overthrow my father" energy. The situation, to put it mildly, is tense. Zeus's dad, Cronus, has a habit of eating his children, not as a metaphor, not figuratively, literally. He hears a prophecy that one of his offspring will replace him. And instead of investing in better parenting techniques, he simply eats each child as soon as it's born, as you do. Historians still argue whether Cronus's child-devouring ways reflect early Greek anxieties about generational power shifts or if it was just an extremely weird poetic device that stuck around. Either way, it's a rough family dynamic. You glance around the cave. Standing guard are the Curetes, mystical warriors whose job is to bang their spears on their shields every time baby Zeus cries. Why? So Cronus won't hear the wailing and come sniffing around for snacks. The cave is like a very intense soundproof nursery, complete with aggressive interpretive dance. Nearby, a divine goat named Amalthea provides milk. She's calm, wide-eyed, and unbothered by the cosmic importance of her dairy products. You pet her gently. She sneezes lightning. You pretend that's normal. There's something strangely cozy about this setup. Yes, it's a panic nursery, but it's got rhythm. The Curetes clanging has a certain lullaby cadence. And the distant sea breeze keeps the goat smell from getting overwhelming. Ray, Zeus's mother, had pulled quite the switcheroo to make this happen. When Zeus was born, she handed Cronus a swaddled rock instead. He swallowed it without question. This, of course, raises questions about ancient Titans' ability to tell the difference between babies and geology. But we won't linger on that. Instead, you sit beside the stone cradle, watching the baby god sleep. Every so often, his hand twitches, and a tiny arc of static fizzles between his fingers, foreshadowing, if you've ever seen it. In one corner of the cave, an elderly nymph is carving runes into the walls. She claims they'll help protect Zeus until he's ready. They also double as doodles of goats wearing sunglasses. Multifunctional magic. Eventually, baby Zeus wakes and begins crying, not a soft baby wail but a full-throated storm shriek. The Curetes spring into action. Clang, clang, clang. You cover your ears. The goat rolls her eyes like this is a regular Tuesday, which in fact, it is. Still, there's peace in this chaos, a sense of divine destiny brewing beneath the goat cheese and tactical distraction dancing. You realize you're witnessing the hinge moment of Greek mythology, the god who survives the feast. The baby who grows up not to be eaten but to do some dramatic eating of his own later. More on that eventually. A fringe tradition insists Amalthea's horn eventually became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, an eternal symbol of abundance. Birthed from the same cave where a baby god once shrieked thunder at ceiling stalactites. You lean back against a smooth wall of ancient limestone and close your eyes. The clanging fades into rhythm. The baby falls asleep again, thumb in mouth, storm in belly. A goat munches calmly nearby. The faint scent of wild herbs drifts in through the cave entrance. For now, all is well in the cradle of rebellion. When you open your eyes, the cave and the clang-clanging warriors are gone. You're older now, or at least it feels that way. The air tastes of salt and searing sunlight, and you're standing beside a glistening shoreline watching a young man wrestle with a truly unreasonable number of animal hides. It's Heracles before the 12 labors, before the immortality, before Disney turned him into a motivational gym rat. He's currently in the process of trying to put on the Nemean lion's hide like it's a new fall jacket. Only, the lion was famously invincible. Its fur doesn't tear. Its body doesn't rot. It's basically an immortal pelt that now smells like wet boulder and roasted rage. You're not sure whether to offer him help or deodorant. But let's rewind. Heracles, born from the not-quite consensual union of Zeus and a mortal queen named Alcmene, is already the poster child for your divine dad has messed up your life before you could even crawl. Hera, Zeus's long-suffering wife, is less than thrilled, and she makes Heracles' entire existence into a contest of endurance, with most of the events involving monsters, madness, or unusually large birds. Historians still debate whether Heracles was based on one real warrior or a mashup of several strong men whose reputations got tangled together in the myth blender. What we do know, he had anger issues, a club, and a complicated relationship with everything from centaurs to fashion. You follow him through scrubland, the scent of wild rosemary crushed beneath your sandals, as he recounts the incident that landed him in this mess, a fit of madness courtesy of Hera that led to him killing his own family. As penance, the oracle at Delphi assigns him 12 labors. And not the light kind either. These are not organize your scroll collection chores. These are go wrestle a sacred boar across icy plains types. Today, he's telling you about the first labor, the Nemean lion. A beast so large it probably had its own postal code. Its hide was impervious to weapons. Heracles realized quickly that swords were about as useful against it as a stern lecture. So, he trapped it in a cave, blocked one of the exits, and strangled it with his arms. For hours. His forearms still bear the bruises. Now, he wants to wear it, partly as armor, mostly, you suspect, for the aesthetic. The head becomes a hood, the paws drape like a slightly homicidal scarf. He turns to you and asks, "Too much?" You nod in solemn approval. Just enough. There's something soothing about watching Heracles prep for labor number 2. He sharpens his club and actual tree trunk against a flat stone, humming something tuneless under his breath. You offer him water, and he thanks you politely before accidentally crushing the cup. The nearby villagers' faces peeking from humble stone huts still whisper about the lion. Some claim it was a punishment from the gods, others say it was the last of a primordial race. There's even one elderly goatherd who insists the lion used to be his neighbor Gregor who just got to Harry, but no one really knows. That's mythology for you. Fringe scholars argue that Heracles' labors represent a solar journey, a symbolic battle against the dark forces of the world, with each monster reflecting a fear, a danger, or an inconvenient metaphor. You don't bring that up. Heracles doesn't seem like a metaphors guy. Later, under the olive trees, he tells you about the Hydra labor number 2, and a real nightmare. Cut off one head, 2 more grow. Also, its breath could kill birds mid-flight. Heracles eventually figures out to cauterize the necks with a flaming torch. Innovation through exhaustion. You ask him what he learned. He says, fire beats heads, then takes a nap against a boulder. And honestly, it's kind of peaceful. You find a spot under a twisted fig tree, watching the wind drag cloud shadows across the sun-bleached hills. Birds call to each other lazily. Somewhere, a lyre plinks from a shepherd's hilltop. And there's Heracles, snoring softly in his lion hoodie, the distant echo of monsters in retreat. It's strange comfort, knowing that even demigods are just trying to get through the next task on the list, even if that list involves things with poison fangs, crab ambushes, and a growing collection of alarming taxidermy. You rest your head against the bark, let your breathing sink with the breeze, and think, for a moment, that maybe sleep is its own quiet labor, and for now, you've earned the right to rest beside the strongest man in Greek myth, listening to the slow, rhythmic sound of his snores and the occasional creak of his lion-skin armor. You wake with a start, not because of a monster or divine wrath, but because something soft and fragrant has fallen on your face. A fig leaf. Above you, the tree stirs in a breeze scented with honey and myrrh. Heracles is gone, off to wrestle another myth into submission, but the air still holds the thick, sun-warmed weight of heroic effort. This time, you're not among demigods or lion-skin models. You're somewhere quieter, stranger. You're among nymphs. The glade you're in is impossibly green, leaves glowing like emeralds, moss spongy underfoot, and little streams babbling with opinions. A cicada choir hums the background score. You suspect that if you stand still long enough, ivy might try to befriend you. You're not alone. Flitting through the trees are creatures who look almost human, almost. Long limbs, flower-draped hair, and that slightly judgmental air of immortality. One leans lazily against a laurel, sipping nectar from a shell. She raises an eyebrow as if to say, "You again," then turns back to braiding her hair with dew. These are dryads, tree spirits, specifically hamadryads, who are born with and bound to particular trees. If the tree dies, they do too, so you're careful not to step too hard or lean too heavily. You wouldn't want to accidentally assassinate someone by sitting on their root system. The glade is buzzing with whispered gossip. Apparently, a mortal man, yes, another one has wandered too far, lured by the scent of jasmine and poor decision-making. His name, Syrinx, is X. This is how you learn about nymph drama. Syrinx, a river nymph, once fled from Pan, the goat-legged, flute-playing nature god with big crush energy and absolutely no concept of personal space. He chased her across glades and rivers until she reached her father's domain, a stream. In desperation, she begged to disappear and was transformed into reeds. When Pan arrived, and found only when singing through the stalks, he cut some down and made his signature panpipe. Yep, romantic failure turned into a musical instrument. Greek myth is nothing if not committed to weird emotional metaphors. You run a finger along the edge of one such reed, still growing near a burbling brook. It hums with vibration when the wind blows a lullaby for someone who's no longer a person. Historians still argue whether nymph tales were cautionary warnings about respecting nature or veiled commentaries on ancient gender roles. Either way, you can't deny the power of the stories: women who melt into trees, rivers, stars, or songs, refusing to be claimed by hands that grab too quickly. Further into the grove, you come across Echo. Yes, that Echo. She doesn't speak much these days, she literally can't. Punished by Hera for distracting her with endless chatter while Zeus was off gallivanting, Echo was cursed to only repeat the last words spoken to her, which, as you can imagine, makes meaningful conversation an uphill battle. Lovely weather, you try. Weather, she sighs. Still, she smiles sadly, and you sit together beneath a willow. The silence isn't uncomfortable, it's restful, just the two of you, sharing space with the butterflies and the occasional rabbit who clearly thinks it owns the place. Echo's story didn't end there. Of course, she fell for Narcissus, who fell for himself literally, staring into his own reflection until he faded away, and she with him, leaving only her voice behind. You listen now, as that voice weaves through the rustling trees and across the stream, the ghost of longing, shimmer of presence. One dryad offers you a drink, its cool spring water in a cup made from a curled lily petal, refreshing and slightly sweet, like a melted snowflake mixed with flower nectar. Don't drink too fast, she warns. Time moves oddly here. And it does. Hours pass like dreams. You watch a butterfly land on a blackberry bush and stay there for what feels like an entire lifetime. You close your eyes and listen to the gurgle of the stream, the sigh of a reed, and the whispered echoes of love's long-lost and leaf-bound lives. You're not sure what time it is, you're not sure it matters, but the forest starts to dim. A cooler breeze passes through, and the nymphs begin to disappear, melting back into bark and vine, their whispers replaced by rustling leaves. Echo lingers a little longer. She brushes your shoulder and whispers one last word you can't quite make out before vanishing into the gloom. And just like that, the grove is empty, but the peace remains. You're alone, surrounded by trees that once danced, rivers that once sang, and reeds that remember. Somewhere nearby, a panpipe plays itself in the breeze. The music fades soft, reedy notes unraveling into the dusk like breath. You rise slowly from the mossy bed, brushing specks of pollen from your clothes as the glade behind you returns to stillness. The warmth of the nymph still lingers, but now the path ahead feels cooler, lined with marble dust and distant incense. You're walking into Olympus. Or at least, the waiting room to Olympus. What hits you first isn't the gold or the glory, it's the bureaucracy. You half expect to find a reception desk with a sleepy satyr filing paperwork. Instead, what you get is a courtyard bustling with minor gods, not the big names yet, no thunderbolts or owls of wisdom, just the overlooked, the underemployed, and the divinely underpaid. A goddess with frizzy hair and a jug of olive oil walks past, muttering about drought schedules. That's Eunostus, the goddess of grain storage. Behind her, a lanky god with acne and ink-stained robes is nervously trying to memorize goat entrail. Readings. He's the divine intern for the Oracle of Delphi. You've stumbled upon a surprisingly relatable part of Olympus, its middle management. Somewhere between the mighty Olympians and the forgotten mortals are these lesser deities, household gods, agricultural spirits, protective charms with attitudes. They were once whispered to by families tending hearths or sailors praying over leaky boats. Now, they form cliques in the celestial courtyard, sipping ambrosia from recycled amphorae and comparing minor cult followings. A divine pigeon struts past with the confidence of a herald. That's Arc, Hermes' overshadowed sister, who once bore rainbow wings before picking the wrong side in the Titanomachi. She gives you a nod that says, "Yeah, I've been demoted, but I still look fabulous." Historians still argue whether these minor gods were pre-Greek spirits absorbed into the mythology, or simply the result of a culture that loved giving divine titles to everything from door hinges to hose straps. Either way, their stories tell us a lot about ancient daily life, about what people feared, loved, or spilled wine on frequently enough to warrant divine attention. You pause near a statue of Hestia, goddess of the hearth. She doesn't say much, never does, but the warmth around her is real. In fact, every home fire was once her altar. People used to whisper to her while stirring lentil soup or lighting evening lamps. Her temple was never as flashy as Zeus' thunder throne, but it was always the cleanest. No sacrifices, just bread, fire, and the occasional mildly panicked prayer when someone forgot the lentils. Further down the path, you pass a cluster of gods arguing over tile work. There's Agathos Daemon, the good spirit who lived in wine cups and offered protection from hangovers. His nemesis, Acles, lurks behind a fig tree. She's the personification of misery and fog. Between them is a god whose only domain is the smooth functioning of hinges. You give him a respectful nod. After all, where would we be without doors that open quietly? There's even a goddess for sneezing. Her name's unknown, her temple non-existent, but you're told she used to receive offerings of thyme and honey every time someone sneezed on a Wednesday. One elderly god explains that he used to protect lost socks from vanishing, back before sandals were a thing. He says wistfully, "I was big in the Cycladic Islands. It's not glamorous, this divine ecosystem, but it's cozy, and it hums with the kind of gentle chaos that makes a place feel lived in." You pass a notice board covered in celestial job postings, seeking minor goddess of afternoon naps, must enjoy cushions and existential ambiguity. Someone has scribbled "I volunteer" in grape juice. You're ushered forward now, up a slight incline. The marble becomes smoother, they are more fragrant. You realize the bureaucracy is thinning and you're approaching the gods with better PR. Before you cross fully into their realm, you glance back one last time. Behind you, a minor wind deity is gently sweeping fallen olive leaves into neat piles with a broom made of cloud hair. He looks up, winks, and mouths good luck, because now comes Olympus proper. No more chipped urns or bored-looking spirits. You step through a columned archway into a world of gleam, laughter, and fragrant absurdity. A feast appears to be happening at all times. Golden light bounces off polished floors, and somewhere, someone's playing a harp with suspiciously smug fingers. And standing right in front of you is the god with the best hair in all mythology, Apollo. He looks like someone who's been voted most likely to invent the lute every year running. Bronze-skinned, radiant, probably just finished composing a hymn about composing hymns. He greets you with a nod that suggests he's graciously lowering himself to your mortal plane, and yes, his teeth sparkle. Literally. Apollo's the god of light, music, reason, medicine, archery, poetry, and probably 2 dozen other job titles he insists on printing on his business cards. He's the kind of overachiever who would start a band, launch a wellness brand, and also be the lead singer and the sun. You follow him past gardens that never wilt, into a chamber where muses lounge on beanbags made of moonlight. They're half listening to an impromptu sonnet competition between Apollo and himself. Historians still argue whether Apollo was meant to be a figure of pure order or simply the god's golden boy with a lyre problem. He could curse a mortal with a plague, then write a touching ballad about their life. It's all very balanced, in a deeply unfair sort of way. You can't help but admire the place. It's divine, sure, but also surprisingly human, filled with jealousies, side projects, missed deadlines, and the occasional divine pun war. A muse offers you a honeyed fig and asks what you'd like to dream of tonight. You say, something warm, something slow, something strange. She smiles and hands you another fig. You sit. You listen to Apollo hum a lullaby for the moon. You feel the marble cold beneath you. And you realize, maybe Olympus is just another kind of household, albeit one with more harp solos and fewer bathroom arguments. There's a distinct smell of laurel and slightly overcooked poetry in the air as you leave Apollo's radiant wing behind. You're still chewing that second fig, definitely enchanted, possibly fermented, and wandering deeper into divine territory. Now, it's time to meet the woman who could outscheme any Olympian, outweave any mortal, and outstare an owl Athena. You first hear her before you see her. A sharp clack-clack of sandals on marble, the rustle of scrolls, and a low mutter about how this plan could have used more geese. You round a corner and find her in what appears to be a celestial war room, drafting battle strategies on a large tablet while simultaneously critiquing someone's thesis on city-state sanitation. Athena doesn't sit. She perches, like a bird of prey, politely pretending it's above all this. Her robe is a storm cloud of gray and silver, her gaze the kind that makes you stand up straighter without realizing it. She acknowledges you with a nod so subtle you wonder if it was a hallucination brought on by fig fumes. Now, here's where it gets deliciously boring. Athena, despite all the spear-holding and Medusa-defeating PR, is also the goddess of spreadsheets. Not literally, but essentially. She governs rational thought, administrative excellence, long-term urban planning, and the correct alignment of roof tiles in defensive architecture. Historians still argue whether Athena was originally a Libyan war goddess absorbed into the Greek pantheon or a fully homegrown symbol of civic virtue and power-washed patriarchy. Either way, she's sharp, terrifyingly so, and her temples doubled as early think tanks, places where scholars, generals, and philosophers came to argue about road curves and battle ethics. She invites you to a small symposium she's hosting with a few minor wind gods, one of the fates, and a surprisingly nervous Hephaestus. The topic, innovations in bronze cauldron aerodynamics. You don't understand most of it, but you nod enthusiastically and pretend to take notes on your palm. Athena talks about the importance of strategy in weaving patterns, why owls are underrated nighttime auditors, and why Poseidon still hasn't paid back that trident loan from 350 BC. She glances at you again, this time with curiosity. What is your city's primary export? She asks. You respond, spreadsheets and existential dread. She smiles faintly. Athenian, then. The conversation turns to her famous rivalries, especially with Poseidon, who once offered the people of Athens a salty spring as a gift. She, in contrast, gave them an olive tree. Guess which one aged better? That tree, by the way, is still said to stand on the Acropolis. Gnarled and ancient, a literal branch of divine civic planning. Athena's origin story is, of course, famously strange. Born fully grown and armed from the forehead of Zeus after he swallowed her pregnant mother Metis to avoid a prophecy. Greek logic, right? One moment you're sipping nectar, the next you've got a daughter climbing out of your skull like it's a birth canal made of migraines and thunderbolts. She rarely laughs, but once in a while, when Hermes spills a drink or Dionysus tries to invent scented helmets, she smirks. You notice that her library contains books that haven't been written yet and architectural models for cities that may never exist. Her plans stretch far into mortal futures, meticulous, precise, dreamlike. She leads you to a balcony overlooking the mortal world. Far below, Athens gleams under moonlight, a tapestry of temples, homes, and occasional philosophical bar fights. They disappoint me, she says softly, but they try. Behind you, the wind picks up, swirling olive leaves through the colonnade. A glowing owl lands on the parapet beside you and blinks slowly, as if assessing your IQ. Then Athena's voice shifts. If you want wisdom, listen to the silence between answers. That's where I hide most of it. She pats the owl, disappears into mist, and leaves you alone with a view of the mortal coil, ambitious, flawed, and utterly fascinating. You descend from the temple and follow a path that hums faintly with harp strings and sandal echoes. It winds downward, through a corridor of statues with mismatched expressions: pride, regret, mild constipation. You pass one bus labeled Heraclitus, philosopher, bath enthusiast, accidental paradox inventor. He's frowning at a dripping faucet. Now the air changes, warmer, heavier, and just slightly louder. You've reached the garden party of Dionysus. A vine unrolls itself at your feet like a welcoming red carpet, and suddenly you're surrounded by cypress trees, dancing satyrs, and at least one goat wearing a tunic. The god of wine is reclining on a chaise made entirely of leopard print cushions, raising a goblet of something that smells like both grape juice and dangerous decisions. Dionysus doesn't walk, he sways, he leans, he arrives. His eyes sparkle with the kind of mischief that gets entire civilizations in trouble. And his hair looks like it's been sculpted by someone very drunk but very passionate. He greets you like an old friend, even though you've just met. Mortal, he exclaims, are you here to study the fermentation of consciousness, or just to borrow my tambourine? You choose the second option, which seems safer. Now, Dionysus is one of those gods whose stories are more chaos than clarity. Historians still argue whether he originated in Thrace, India, or was simply the divine embodiment of that one cousin who turns weddings into music videos. He represents ecstasy, transformation, theater, and breaking the rules. Also wine, mostly wine. He once turned a pirate crew into dolphins, inspired half the world's tragic plays, and was born from Zeus after his mortal mother exploded. Because of course, his cults weren't your average toga party. They involved masks, ivy crowns, whispered names, and long, rhythmic dances that probably wouldn't be allowed on daytime television. But at their core, they were about freedom, releasing the parts of yourself that society told you to silence. Dionysus pours you a drink and tells you not to worry, it's only metaphorically intoxicating. You sip anyway, and suddenly everything smells like figs, flute music, and the distant memory of campfires. The vines pulse gently with life, curling around your ankles like affectionate snakes. You sit on the grass and watch as dryads twirl, their laughter echoing through the leaves. One satyr offers you a riddle in exchange for a mushroom. Another gives you a napkin embroidered with in vino veritas but also in vino naps. You do, and the garden stretches out before you like a dream that doesn't need waking from. Somewhere behind you, Athena scoffs. Somewhere ahead, Hera is probably frowning. But here, under the stars, with laughter in the air and a very polite goat offering you baklava, you feel something ancient stir, the freedom to be joyfully, sleepily, fully alive. The music fades slowly behind you, each note tugging softly at your senses like a breeze reluctant to leave. As you walk farther from Dionysus' fine-laced revelry, the ground underfoot begins to change from soft, loamy earth to something dry, cracked, and sun-bleached. The party is over, and now you're entering a different kind of myth, the kind that deals in grudges, golden apples, and the worst family reunion in Olympus history. It smells like old olive oil, distant thunder, and the unmistakable scent of drama. Welcome to the domain of Hera. You spot her almost immediately. No wild garlands, no divine chaos, just a serene, perfectly symmetrical courtyard where every hedge is trimmed within an inch of its eternal life. Hera stands at its center, upright and still, like a statue that decided being alive was the more efficient option. She's dressed in regal blues and golds, her crown precise, her posture legal. She's not fuming, at least not outwardly, but you can sense that just behind the composed facade is a storm cloud wearing heels. She greets you with a nod so formal you almost curtsy by accident. Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, protector of oaths, and patron of suspicious glances, you try to make small talk about the weather. But she immediately steers the conversation toward the unacceptable decline in mortal fidelity. You regret bringing it up. She offers you a tour of her archived stone corridors lined with scrolls, feathers from sacred peacocks, and surveillance reports on Zeus extracurriculars. They think I'm only vengeful. She murmurs, but I remember everything, every vow, every betrayal. Historians still argue whether Hera was a pre-Hellenic matriarchal deity diminished by later patriarchal storytelling, or whether her image as the scorned wife was always baked into the mythos like olives into a loaf of divine bread. Either way, her presence feels enormous, steady, and just a little sharp round edges. She pauses beside a golden tapestry that depicts the infamous wedding of Peleus and Thetis, the one where she, Athena, and Aphrodite were tricked into fighting over who was the fairest. You remember how that ended, the golden apple, a mortal named Paris, and the small matter of the Trojan War. She raises an eyebrow at you. We don't speak of the apple, she says dryly. But I kept the peel. Out of spite. You ask about her sacred animal, the peacock, and she softens just a touch. She tells you how the like feathers were a tribute to Argus, the 100-eyed guardian she once appointed after his untimely death by Hermes. No less, she honored him by setting his eyes in the tail of her favorite bird. It's quietly beautiful, this glimpse of reverence beneath her reputation. She leads you to a small temple dedicated to childbirth and women's rights. The walls are carved with stories of quiet resilience of mortal women who endured more than they were meant to. Hera gestures to a basin where water ripples without being touched. Each wave is a promise made. She says, most break, but some survive. Then she hands you a bundle of olive branches tied with thread and instructs you to place them on a hearth that isn't burning. You do as she says. A gentle warmth rises, no flame, just memory, and you feel, strangely, forgiven for things you didn't even know you'd done. Just as you begin to relax in her presence, Hera offers you a polite smile and says, now, let's visit someone who requires your particular patience. You exit her domain through a colonnade flanked with statues of loyal wives and suspicious goats. The atmosphere tightens, and even the air feels awkward. You've arrived at Olympus' most polarizing corner, the Forge of Hephaestus. There's no grand hall here, just a soot-streaked chamber filled with the sound of hammers, bubbling metal, and occasional muttering. The god of blacksmiths, fire, and gloriously passive-aggressive furniture greets you with a nod, his arms caked in bronze dust and dignity. Hephaestus is built like someone who's been wronged by several family members and decided to channel it into masterwork weaponry. He's gruff, methodical, and surprisingly soft-spoken. His workshop smells of hot iron and frustration-aged wine. He tells you his origin story with a shrug. Thrown off Olympus by my mother Hera for being imperfect, later invited back to build thrones. He gestures to one golden seat with mechanical arms and suspicious hinges. She sat in that one. Couldn't stand up for 3 days. Fair trade. You blink, and he's already halfway through forging a delicate chainmail that looks like liquid light. Hephaestus' gifts to the gods are legendary Achilles' armor, Hermes' winged sandals, and Pandora, who we'll talk about later. For now, he's crafting something new, a music box shaped like a volcano, which plays lullabies if you twist the lava spout just right. He offers you a seat beside his anvil and starts telling you about ancient metallurgy. You nod politely, pretending to understand words like quenching matrix and thermal yield curves. Then he hands you a half-finished goblet and says, hammer that flat. You do. And it ends up looking like a very apologetic spoon. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus' disability was symbolic, narrative, or simply the ancient Greeks trying to explain why even gods have imperfections. What's clear is that he turned rejection into creation, heartbreak into invention. Not the most glamorous mythos, but perhaps the most human. There's a moment when he stops working and simply stares into the forge, watching sparks dance like tiny, angry stars. They never remember that I'm the only one who builds what they all need. He murmurs, but that's all right. I remember, before you leave. He hands you a bronze key with no door, just in case you find something that should stay closed. he says. As you step away, your clothes smell faintly of smoke and iron. The world shimmers with heat waves and echoing clangs. You've seen gods of war, wisdom, vengeance, and revelry, but there's something deeply grounding about a deity who works with his hands, who shaped stories from metal, who reminds you that not all power comes with thunder. And just as you're pondering that, the path veers sharply. It's getting darker now, stars beginning to blink into being above you. You don't realize it yet, but you're approaching the goddess who holds the keys to the underworld and has no intention of letting you leave without a few juicy secrets. The temperature dips with an eerie subtlety, as though the very light has grown cautious. The forge's glow fades behind you, and the stones beneath your feet become damp and moss-covered. Shadows stretch just a little longer than they should. The air smells faintly of pomegranates, old stone, and secrets nobody should really know. You've arrived at the boundary not of Olympus, but of something deeper, something quieter. Persephone is waiting. She doesn't announce herself with fanfare or thunder. She simply appears, barefoot and composed, standing beside a quiet stream that wasn't there a moment ago. Her dress is made of twilight and petals. She looks at you like she's seen your dreams already and is unimpressed but not unkind. You try a cheerful greeting. She replies with a small smile and says, "You're early, or maybe late. Time works differently near me." Then she turns and begins walking. You follow. Persephone's myth is one of the most layered in Greek lore. Daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, abducted or courted, depending on which vase you ask, by Hades, and crowned queen of the underworld. But here, in the hush between seasons, she's just Persephone, the dual goddess, spring incarnate, and also, frankly, kind of goth. You pass through an orchard of pale, sleeping fruit trees. The leaves don't rustle, they murmur. She plucks a pomegranate, splits it delicately, and offers you one ruby-red seed. You politely decline. "Wise," she says. "Most don't." Historians still debate the meaning of Persephone's descent and return. Was it a metaphor for the agricultural cycle, a myth to explain winter, or a patriarchal allegory that got reinterpreted over time by women who saw themselves not as victims, but as queens in their own right? You reach a shaded glen where spirits drift like motes in the air, whispering poetry in forgotten dialects. Persephone pauses. "This is where I come when Olympus gets too loud." Which is always. You ask if she likes being queen of the underworld. She tilts her head. "It's not really about liking, but I've grown into it. Besides, Hades is tittier than most gods. Eat." He labels his scrolls. She leads you to a small shrine made of obsidian and bone-white laurel. Around it are offerings, strands of hair, scraps of parchment, a single worn sandal. "Mortals leave strange things for the dead," she murmurs, "but even stranger are the things they leave for me." Suddenly, a gust of wind carries laughter, not hers. Someone's been eavesdropping. You spin around and there he is, Hermes, again. Except now he's in his underworld getup, darker tunic, winged sandals slightly scuffed, and a grin that could only belong to someone who's just escorted 10,000 souls and is still feeling flirty. "Fancy seeing you here," he says, pretending not to wink at Persephone. She rolls her eyes. He drops by whenever someone new dies with gossip. Hermes bows to you, then vanishes into a cypress tree because of course he does. You and Persephone continue alone. She leads you toward a mirror-like pool. As you look in, you don't see your face, you see memories you haven't made yet. She gives you a long look. "It's not about fate," she says. "It's about how you walk into what's already waiting." You sit beside the pool in silence. Somewhere, a nightingale begins to sing in reverse. Then, just as suddenly as it all began, she stands and brushes dust from her hands. "Time to go," she says. "There are other gods, other myths. But don't worry, I'll see you again. I always do." The world twists sideways, not violently, but with the slow, dreamlike turn of a carousel underwater, and suddenly, you're back on Olympus. Sort of. Because the person waiting for you next isn't exactly full-time divine. She's immortal. Or maybe the first human not to regret opening a box. Her name is Pandora. And she's currently sitting cross-legged on a hillside, feeding crumbs to a clay bird. You hesitate. She doesn't. "Hi," she says brightly. "Want to see something weird?" "You kind of don't, but you nod anyway." She lifts a small, polished box from her satchel sealed, humming faintly. Probably cursed. Pandora is one of those mythic figures historians still don't know quite what to do with. Created by the gods, gifted with charm, curiosity, and possibly a trapdoor mind. She was given a jar, later mistranslated as a box, and told not to open it. Naturally, she did. Out came all the world's suffering and one last thing at the very bottom: hope. You ask why she opened it. She grins. "I was bored." Her version of events is decidedly different from the usual tales. "They made me to punish mankind," she says. "But they forgot I'm also clever. I let the bad stuff out. Yes, but I kept the good part." She taps the box. It still hums when someone finds a new kind of hope. It's noisy around hospitals, oddly quiet at tax offices. You sit beside her as the wind plays with your hair. There's something deeply relaxing about being in the company of someone who's been blamed for everything, and yet seems utterly at peace. Maybe that's the real twist. Pandora doesn't regret anything. She just regrets that nobody remembers what else was in the box. "There was music," she says softly, "and a recipe for perfect flatbread." The sky overhead begins to shift, peach fading into indigo, then bruised purple, then quiet silver. It's almost time to leave this part of Olympus. Pandora stands, brushes off her knees, and offers you the box. "Don't worry, it only opens for me." You ask if that's because of magic. "No," she replies, "it's because I glued it shut." And with that, she walks off, whistling a tune that sounds like it might have been taught to her by a muse on a dare. You stand, stretch, and realize something. You've met gods, queens, and questionable furniture designers, but only Pandora made you laugh without trying to impress you. Which is saying something, because up ahead, Ars is flexing. You try not to make eye contact. Ars, god of war, is standing shirtless again on what appears to be a training field made entirely of marble and dramatic lighting. His armor gleams. His biceps gleam. Even his skull gleams, which frankly seems excessive. There are no actual battles happening, but you get the distinct impression that if a war did break out in the next 5 minutes, Ars would host it himself. With a dramatic speech and at least 3 costume changes, he sees you, and no, he's waving. "Hey," he booms, like a sports coach trying to be approachable. "Want to spar?" You politely decline, citing allergies, sore calves, and a deep, personal commitment to pacifism. He looks momentarily disappointed, then shrugs. "Suit yourself. Most mortals faint by round 3 anyway." Ars doesn't get a lot of fans in mythology circles. He's not strategic like Athena, not charming like Apollo, not spooky clever like Hades. He's just war, loud, intense. Probably banned from at least one Pan-Hellenic festival. But historians still argue whether he was ever meant to be taken seriously. In early Greek religion, Ars was more of a cautionary tale than a hero. A personification of raw violence rather than military glory. The kind of guy you invoke only when things are already out of hand, like calling the god of hangovers to fix your bad choices. Still, here on his own turf, Ars is surprisingly relaxed. He flops onto a stone bench, his third favorite. He informs you and begins sharpening a spear purely out of habit. "It's peaceful here," he says, almost wistfully. "Nobody screams unless I ask them to." And then you ask if he enjoys being the god of war. He grins. "Absolutely. But also, no." He glances down. "You know what it's like to be summoned every time someone gets angry and doesn't know what to do with it." You nod. "Kind of, yeah," he says. "It's not all battle cries and epic poems. Sometimes it's just being blamed for things I didn't start." McHne. You ask him about love specifically, his long-standing affair with Aphrodite. He visibly blushes. "That's complicated," he mutters. "She likes roses. I like flammable objects. We meet in the middle." Then, in a burst of godly overcompensation, he decides to show you his battle goats. Yes, battle goats. Armored, aggressive, named things like Clang and Regret. You scratch one gently behind the ear. It purrs. That's probably not normal, but you've stopped asking questions. As the sun crests over Mount Olympus, painting the training field in orange and gold, Ars leans back and sighs. Mortals always think I'm angry, but most of the time, I'm just noisy. That actually makes sense. You thank him for the goat demo, and he gives you a bronze coin stamped with a tiny helmeted chicken. For courage, he says solemnly. And with that, you exit the arena of testosterone and stumble right into a much quieter, weirder place. It smells like honey, ink, and possibly burnt oregano. You've found Hestia's hearth, the goddess of home, hearth, and the gentle art of not being dramatic. Hestia is currently rearranging the logs in an eternal fire that doesn't actually burn wood. It just is. She looks up and nods once. Doesn't say anything. Just gestures to a cushion near the flames. You sit. There's something soothing about her presence, like being inside your grandmother's kitchen, but your grandmother happens to control sacred fire and doesn't care for gossip. Unlike the other gods, Hestia doesn't seek attention. She was the first to be born of Cronus and Rhea, and the first swallowed. Later, when the Olympians divided up domains, she chose the hearth over more glamorous options. She wanted to be the center by not being the center. You ask her what people pray to her for. She shrugs. Double quotes warmth. Safety. That their soup doesn't boil over. Then, in a voice soft as embers, she says, I keep the fires burning so they know where to return. You sip something warm she's placed beside you. It tastes like nostalgia and toasted barley, possibly chamomile, possibly divine. Historians still debate how central Hestia actually was an ancient cult practice. She had no big temples, no flashy festivals, no scandals involving livestock or golden apples, but her flame was kept in every home. Every city's public hearth, quiet, constant, essential. You ask why she never joined the other gods in their quarrels. She smiles. Because someone had to stay home and hold the universe together. You glance her own. Her space isn't fancy, just tidy. There's a mosaic of a cat, a loaf of bread cooling, a scroll half finished. And that's when it hits you. Hestia is the only god who never leaves Olympus, because she is Olympus. The part that stays put while everyone else goes off chasing glory or starting doomed love triangle. She gives you a gentle nod. You've done enough wandering today. You feel your shoulders drop. You can rest here a while. And so you do. You stretch out beside the fire, the embers crackling like lullabies, the warmth curling around your toes like a sleepy myth. You don't dream. Not because nothing is happening, but because, for once, nothing needs to. Later, when you wake, if that's the right word, she's gone. Or maybe she's just in the next room, tending to someone else who forgot how to be still. You rise, refreshed in a way that feels older than rest. And as you step through the quiet threshold of her domain, you enter a place of noise, song, and possibly interpretive dance. Because up ahead, Dionysus is throwing a dinner party, and you, somehow, are on the guest list. You barely make it 3 steps before a grape hits you square on the forehead. A musical laugh follows, flute-like and just slightly off-key. Welcome, someone yells over a chorus of tambourines. You made it just in time for the third course / poetry duel / experimental wine unveiling. Yes, you're now in Dionysus' realm, which appears to be a sprawling banquet pavilion held together by ivy, ambition, and questionable choices. It smells like honeyed figs, roasting lamb, and a lot of wine, the kind of wine that feels like it's already been pre-approved by your liver. For regret, a leopard wearing a laurel crown walks by, nodding politely. Dionysus himself appears moments later, barefoot, purple-robed, and carrying a goblet that seems to refill itself whenever he blinks. Hey, he says, his voice smooth and dreamy. You look tense. Loosen up or I'll assign you a personal satyr. You glance over at the satyrs, who are currently trying to juggle amphory while playing lyres with their feet. You politely assure him no satyr is necessary yet. Dionysus, god of wine, fertility, madness, and all things delightfully extra, is hard to pin down. Was he imported from Thrace or Asia Minor? Scholars still argue over his origin, and even the Greeks themselves weren't totally sure where he came from, just that once he arrived, everything got significantly more chaotic. He gestures to a table overflowing with fruit you don't recognize. Try the red spiky one. It's seasonal. Might be real. Might be metaphorical. You eat it. It tastes like strawberries. Philosophy. And a little bit of danger. And like most gods, Dionysus isn't about order or hierarchy. His rituals, often celebrated in the form of Dionysian mysteries, were ecstatic, secretive, and often involved dramatic costume changes, nighttime dancing, and the occasional mistaken identity. Think spiritual theater with wine pairings. But he isn't just a party god. No, Dionysus is deeper than that. He represents transformation. The kind that creeps up on you when you're not looking, when music and rhythm and fermented grapes have ruined your whole idea of who you are. People misunderstand me, he says as he pours you something that smells like lavender and rebellion. They think I'm about excess, but really, I'm about release. Letting go. You nod. Probably too enthusiastically. He claps his hands. Suddenly, the music shifts, a lyre solo so haunting it could undo your taxes. Then, without warning, the floor becomes a stage. The poets step forward, one dressed like a fish, the other in a toga made of grapes. The poetry duel begins. You don't understand a word, but it's mesmerizing. Every line ends in a dramatic gasp or an offstage cymbal crash. Dionysus leans in and whispers, "The fish is winning." You believe him. As the evening or perhaps early morning drifts on, Dionysus tells you stories of mortals who found freedom in madness, of women who danced into forests and never came back quite the same, of kings who tried to resist and were gently, creatively undone. Do you remember Pentheus? He asks. Tried to ban my rights, got turned into a tree snack by his own mother. You pause mid-sip. Long story, he says with a shrug. Let's just say, don't mess with joy. You wonder aloud why joy would need defending. He looks at you, dead serious now. Because it's fragile. And that makes it sacred. He doesn't say anything else for a while. The revelry continues around you, but softer now, drowsier. A few satyrs are curled up under a fig tree, snoring in harmony. One of the grape-draped poets is using a lyre as a pillow. You begin to feel the wine not drunk, but dreamy. Like your mind has been turned into a velvet armchair. Dionysus offers you one last thing, a mask. You ask what it's for. To remember that identity is a costume, he says, and sometimes, taking it off is the only way to feel like yourself. You put it on. It smells like myrrh and moonlight. Then, almost imperceptibly, the vines begin to part. A soft breeze tugs at your sleeve, beckoning you onward. Dionysus lifts his goblet and toasts you. Don't get too serious out there. You wave goodbye as the party fades behind you, though somehow, the music keeps playing faintly in your ears. Like a memory you're not quite done dreaming, the path ahead narrows into marble steps, leading down into darkness lit only by fireflies. You follow it without question. It leads to a shoreline. A dark, placid river stretches ahead, and there, beside a skeletal boat and a very judgmental oar, stands Hades. He checks a scroll and sighs. You're early, he mutters. Hades doesn't look up as you approach. He's busy flipping through a scroll that seems impossibly long for someone who governs a population that, you assume, doesn't fall many complaints. Name? He asks dryly. Though he already knows it. You haven't even spoken yet, and he's sighing with all the weight of someone who's heard every excuse in the cosmos. You mumble something about being on a sleep-based historical tour, not actually dead. He eyes you, then eyes the scroll again. Still counts, he mutters, but waves you onto the boat anyway. The river ahead is flat as obsidian and hums with a sound you can't quite place, like wind through marble or humming from under the world's thickest pillow. You settle in as Hades rows. They are slicing silently through the water. He doesn't talk much, which is fine after the wine, the poetry duel, and the philosophical fruit. You're ready for a little quiet. Eventually, though, he speaks. You mortals always think of the underworld as this place of punishment, screams, fire, eternal paperwork. He sighs again. But most people just rest. The real punishment is how bored some of them are. You ever tried entertaining a shade who died before sandals were invented? You admit that sounds challenging. Hades, god of the dead, isn't cruel. He's just bureaucratic. Responsible. The older sibling who made color-coded chore wheels while Zeus was off inventing adultery. He was given the underworld not as a reward, but because someone had to do it. And he happened to be punctual. Historians still argue whether the Greek underworld was truly terrifying or just deeply inconvenient. Some texts describe vast fields where souls wander aimlessly. Others describe personalized pockets, some serene, some mildly frustrating. Like a DMV run by ghosts. There's also Tartarus, the deep abyss reserved for the truly naughty, titans, oath-breakers, people who spoiled the ends of epic poems. But most souls, they end up in the asphodel meadows. Sort of a purgatory with decent landscaping and no snack options. Hades gestures toward the bank, and suddenly you're drifting past an amphitheater made entirely of fog. Silent shapes sit on misty benches, watching a one-woman tragedy performed by a ghost who might be Sappho. Or might be your high school Latin teacher. It's hard to tell time down here, Hades says. Not looking at you, or remember names. Some people think that's peaceful. Others, well. He stops rowing, and the boat glides itself to a stone landing where a three-headed dog is napping. Cerberus opens one eye, then the second, then the third. You freeze. He won't bite, Hades says. Unless you smell like fear. Or olives. Do you smell like olives? You don't think so. Cerberus sniffs you anyway, licks your hand with a tongue the size of a rug, then yawns and goes back to sleep. You follow Hades along a narrow hallway made of black glass. The walls shimmer faintly with moving images, memories. You realize, people reliving picnics, lullabies, even arguments. But they all seem gentler in this form. Smoothed down by the afterlife like stones in a stream. Souls keep pieces of their lives, Hades says. Little loops. Some get stuck in them. Others just, we play the nice parts. You ask whether he ever watches his own memories. He hesitates, then shrugs. Once in a while, Persephone makes popcorn. Ah yes, Persephone, his wife, the half-year queen of the underworld. Depending on the version you believe. Their love story is either a tragic kidnapping or an elaborate seasonal commute. Hades insists. It's complicated. She likes being here sometimes, he says. It's quiet. No lightning bolts. No satyrs singing breakup songs under her window. You ask if she decorates. He smiles faintly. She makes me keep pomegranates in every room. I'm allergic, you laugh. But it echoes too loudly in the corridor, and he waves you to be quieter. As you walk deeper, Hades shows you the Elysian fields, lush, golden, and suspiciously well manicured. This is where heroes go, philosophers, poets who died young, and a few especially beloved dogs. One of those dogs bounds past. It's translucent, but very waggy. They say some souls get reborn, Hades muses. But only if they really want to. Otherwise, they stay here. It's not paradise, exactly. But it's enough. You notice one shade standing under a tree, whispering lines of poetry to itself. Another plays an invisible flute. One is just napping, forehead resting on an eternal library book. You ask if Hades ever gets tired. He doesn't answer right away. Then, of course, but someone has to remember everyone. Someone has to keep the names. As if on cue, a breeze carries thousands of soft voices, names murmured in ancient dialects. Old syllables from long-dead mouths. The wind passes. And it's silent again. Hades turns to you. You're not staying. Obviously. But since you're here, take this. He hands you a coin, not gold, but something heavier. It's warm in your palm and inscribed with a word you can't read but feel somewhere deep in your ribs. For memory, he says, so you don't forget what forgetting feels like. You thank him. He nods. Don't come back too soon. And just like that, the hallway opens into sunlight. The underworld peels away behind you. And you're blinking against a dawn sky you don't remember approaching, the scent of olive groves. And seawater returns, and a quiet new road stretches ahead. It leads to a small, dusty hut. A woman is waiting outside, stirring a cauldron that smells suspiciously like chicken soup and magic. She waves. You're just in time for tea. You squint. Is that? Circe. You shuffle up the path toward the hut, brushing dust from your tunic. You're not sure when it became a tunic. But your modern clothes vanished somewhere between ghost dog licks and Hades' quiet bureaucracy. The woman at the door smiles like she's been expecting you. Maybe she has. This is Circe, the famed sorceress of Aya, the witch who once turned Odysseus's men into pigs and then, later, into more polite dinner guests. She ushers you inside without a word. The hut is warm and smells of thyme, rosemary, and a kind of bubbling, stewed patience. A cat slinks by. You can't tell if it was once human, or if it just resents you on principle. Circe pours 2 cups of tea, one for her, one for you. Steam curls upward in a way that might spell letters if you stared too long. You choose not to. So, she says, you've met the gods, walked the halls of Hades, and somehow avoided becoming a talking bush. Impressive. You thank her. She waves it off. I've seen sturdier men turned into goats after a strong breeze. You sip your tea. It tastes like honey, lemon, and a memory of something soft. Circe sits across from you, one hand idly stirring a pot that might contain dinner or a prophecy. Her golden eyes gleam. Let's talk about monsters, she says, as casually as someone offering to discuss weather patterns, not the big, flashy ones. Hydra, Chimera, the Minotaur, they get all the attention. I'm talking about the quiet ones, the ones nobody remembers. She begins listing them off like ingredients. There was the Impuisse, a shape-shifting creature who seduced travelers and drank their blood, but only if they were arrogant. I actually liked her. She had standards. You nod, eyes wide. And the Mormo, she continues, part bogeyman, part babysitter myth. Mothers used to invoke her to get children to behave. Eat your olives or Mormo will nibble your toes. That sort of thing. You shudder slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming volume of unused bedtime threats in the ancient world. Historians still argue whether creatures like these originated as metaphors, foreign imports, or simply bored storytellers trying to out-creep each other at fireside gatherings. Many scholars believe Impuisse was a personification of anxiety around feminine sexuality, while others think she just made for a good ghost story. Circe, for her part, insists most monsters were misunderstood. I met Lamia once, she says, tossing a bay leaf into the cauldron. She was once a queen, had children, then Hera cursed her again. Hera doing her classic punish the woman routine. Lamia lost everything and became hungry, but she never stopped mourning. You ask whether Circe ever felt sorry for the monsters. All the time, she replies, but I never forget what they can do. You glance at the cat, who stares at you in a way that suggests it used to be a dentist. She leans in. Want to see where some of them live? You suppose you're not doing anything else this afternoon? With a wave of her hand and a puff of sage-scented smoke, the hut blurs around you. When the air clears, you're standing at the edge of a craggy, wine-battered cliff. Below, a maze of sea caves yawns open like mouths. You can hear faint growls, groans, and what might be someone tuning a lyre badly. Circe gestures down. That one Scylla's den, 6 heads. Terrible listener. Used to be a beautiful nymph. Got cursed for bathing in the wrong bay. Typical. She points to another cave. And that one's where Echidna used to nap. Mother of monsters, you know. Sphinxes, Cerberus, Chimera, all came out of her like a very tired bakery. The sea below churns, gray and gurgling. The wind here smells like salt and bedtime stories left too long in the dark. As you peer over the edge, Circe pulls you gently back. That's close enough. Some of them bite curiosity in half. You ask whether she ever considered retiring, maybe opening a cafe in Delphi, somewhere quieter. She shrugs. Once. But who'd look after the forgotten monsters? Who'd remind the world they existed? The two of you walk inland now, over brittle grass and under fig trees that whisper too clearly for comfort. A small pond appears. Up ahead, its surface mirror still. Circe kneels beside it. This is my scrying pool, she explains. It shows things that were lost, things that might still be. You look into the water. At first, nothing. Then a faint swirl of images, ancient islands submerged, forgotten shrines reclaimed by moss, and a little girl in Mycenaean sandals telling a story to a turtle. You blink, and it's gone. Circe doesn't ask what you saw. She just stands, dusts off her hands, and smiles a tired, eternal kind of smile. You've seen enough for one lifetime, she says. You agree, though you feel like maybe you've only scratched the surface. She leads you back toward the hut. The sun is low now, bleeding soft orange across the sky. A breeze rises, carrying the scent of laurel and long-lost legends. Before you go, Circe gives you something small, a sprig of mint, tied with golden thread. It keeps dreams sweet, she says. Unless you're Odysseus. He was. Impossible. You wave goodbye. She waves back with one hand, the other still stirring something mysterious. You step off her island, and right into a garden that doesn't quite belong to the waking world. You blink against the sudden brightness, and the smell of seawater gives way to something richer: jasmine, crushed herbs, and baked figs cooling on terracotta. The ground beneath you is mosaic now. Tiny tiles pressed into intricate patterns: dolphins, lyres, olive branches, and a head. The garden, a sanctuary of soft shadows and blooming chaos. You're in the courtyard of an ancient gymnasium, though no one seems to be exercising. Instead, people are reclining on couches under cypress trees, nibbling grapes and debating whether numbers are real or just very convincing suggestions. Welcome to Plato's Academy or something like it. The lines between myth and memory are blurry here. A young man with ridiculous cheekbones waves you over and offers a fig. We're just about to begin the symposium, he says, as if you didn't just tumble out of a witch's kitchen. You sit. Today's topic, love, and maybe the immortality of the soul, if there's time before sunset. The man introduces himself as Pausanias, and he launches into a speech that is only half about love and halfway about legal precedents. You try to follow, but a nearby breeze carries the sound of a flute, and your mind drifts like a lazy leaf. Socrates eventually appears, barefoot, grinning, and somehow already mid-argument. He seems less like a philosopher and more like that uncle who ruins card games by insisting on house rules and asking too many questions. As you sip wine from a clay cup that keeps refilling itself, magic, philosophy, both, you're drawn into the rhythm of it. The arguments are calm but strange. One man insists love is a ladder made of beautiful minds. Another thinks it's a kind of divine madness. No one's quite sure who's right. Historians still argue whether these symposia were mostly intellectual salons or more like intellectual toga parties. The line between drinking and debating was blurry in classical Athens. And frankly, that's probably why anyone remembered any of it at all. A servant brings honey cakes, and you take one greedily. It's warm and somehow tastes like a memory you've never had. Then the talk turns from love to heroes. From heroes to gods, from gods to the nature of the world itself. A sleepy man with ink-stained fingers proposes that the universe is made of 4 elements. His friend disagrees, he's a 5th element purist. A third suggests the world rides on the back of a giant fish. Socrates doesn't correct him. Debate grows looser, dreamier. Someone recites Homer. Someone else accuses Homer of embellishment. Someone else suggests that even myths have myths inside them. The shadows grow longer. Someone dozes against a column. A gentle snooze, like a temple guardian finally off duty. You wander away, down a corridor of olive trees and etched stone walls, past marble statues with missing noses but too intense eyes. You duck into a side chamber. Inside, scrolls, stacks upon stacks of them, parchment coiled like sleeping snakes. This is a library, perhaps the ghost of Alexandria's, or maybe one built only in dreams. You pick one at random. It unrolls itself in your hands. The handwriting is precise but alive. It tells the story of Pythagoras, not just his triangles, but his cult of silence, his belief in transmigration of the soul, his refusal to eat beans because he thought they housed spirits. Did you know that Pythagoras banned legumes among his followers? That's a real historical detail. Historians still argue whether his bean ban was health advice, mysticism, or just a long-standing vendetta against gassy dinners. You set down the scroll and pick up another. It hums faintly in your hands. This one's about the Orphics, a mystery cult that believed the soul was divine but trapped in flesh as punishment. They taught purification, music, and the secret way to escape the cycle of rebirth. You can't help but wonder if Orpheus had started it all, his descent into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice, his music so sad it made stones weep. But he looked back, of course. They always do. The scroll ends with a question: what music will you carry beyond the veil? You roll it up quietly. Outside, the sun's nearly gone. You return to the garden. Most of the philosophers are gone now, perhaps dissolved into logic, or wandered into their next metaphor. Only Socrates remains. He's sitting cross-legged, looking at the stars just beginning to pierce the dusk. He pats the space beside him. "You've come a long way," he says. "But the journey's not about answers. You sit. You've met witches and gods, monsters and mothers, warriors and scholars," he says, his voice growing smaller as the stars grow brighter. "And yet, here you are, still wondering what to do with your hands." You look down. He's not wrong. "Let the myths stay a little fuzzy," he says. "That's where the warmth is. Truth's a sharp thing. Sleep doesn't need it." You rest your head back against the marble column. The stars shift slowly overhead. In the stillness, Socrates hums a little tune. It's out of key, but comforting. The breeze moves through the garden, and a fig falls from a tree with a sound like punctuation. You don't pick it up. You let it be. When you open your eyes, though you don't remember closing them, the stars above the academy have multiplied into impossible constellations. You recognize Orion, but he's reclining now, holding not a bow but a cup of tea. Cassiopeia has braided her hair. Someone's added a dolphin to the sky, and it appears to be waving. You sit up slowly, blinking against the velvet dark calm. Socrates is gone. The fig tree is gone. Even the warm stone under your back has become sand-fine, dry, and golden, as if you've been deposited gently at the edge of a desert. And there, flickering in the near distance, is the unmistakable glow of torchlight. You trudge toward it. It's that kind of dream sand that somehow isn't in your shoes. The night air smells faintly of cinnamon, smoke, and campfire wine. And as the light grows clearer, you see you've wandered into the tail end of a festival. Not just any celebration, though. This is the Eleusinian mysteries, the ancient rites of Demeter and Persephone. And you've arrived just in time for the part no one ever wrote down. A robed figure beckons you in, placing a garland of myrtle on your head and whispering, "Don't worry, everyone forgets the sacred password anyway." You follow a winding path between flickering torches and silent figures. There's a sacred hush. But it's not solemn, it's the kind of hush before a joke lands, or just after a story ends. Ahead, a wide open space, a field strewn with flower petals. Soft music wafts from lyres strung low, and someone pours barley water into shallow cups. You're offered one. You sip. It tastes of the earth, bitter, but calming, like soil remembered through dream. The mysteries were among the most important religious rites in ancient Greece, dedicated to the story of Persephone's descent into the underworld and her return. The initiates swore never to reveal what they saw or experienced. And remarkably, none of them ever did, not fully. Historians still argue whether the rituals involved symbolic death and rebirth, psychedelic barley drinks, or simply a very long, very powerful group hug under torchlight. But you're here, and it's clear this is something deeper than doctrine. A woman in a crown of woven wheat stands at the center of the circle. Demeter. She doesn't speak, but you feel her gaze press into you like warm sunlight. She extends a hand, and beside her, Persephone does the same. You hesitate. Two hands, two stories. You take them both. The field trembles slightly, as if stirred by an invisible plow, and then the world shifts. In a blink, the field becomes a cavern. The petals are now ashes. Persephone's hair is dusted with snow, her expression solemn, regal. You're back underground, but it doesn't feel like a trap. This is her realm now. She is not a prisoner anymore. She rules this place half the year, not because she must, but because she chooses to return. Persephone guides you past columns of bone-pale stone, through a garden where black poppies bloom. There hear hums with something slower than music, deeper than thought. This is where seeds sleep, she says. Her voice is like bells buried in velvet. Nothing grows without silence first. It's a lesson, one Demeter never wanted to learn. But even goddesses have to let go. You reach a small pool, mirror still, like Circe's but quieter. You lean in, expecting a reflection. Instead, you see memories not your own, a child laying out votive cakes on a threshold, a priestess weeping with joy under a harvest moon, a boy humming to himself while he plants barley, not knowing his tune is a hymn. Persephone touches your shoulder. You carry all of them now, she says. No pressure. You ask whether she resents her fate. She smiles, half sun, half shadow. There is no fate, she answers. Only seeds and where we plant them. You don't know what that means exactly. But it's the kind of thing that seems truer when whispered underground. She offers you a single pomegranate seed. You can take it, she says. It won't bind you here. Not tonight. You hold it in your palm. It glows faintly more ember than fruit. Then, a breeze. But not the dry whisper of the underworld. This is warmer, tinged with salt and rosemary. Persephone steps back. Demeter returns, all golden cloak and spring wind. They nod together. And the scene begins to dissolve into petals again. You're being lifted. Not by hands. Not by ropes. Just lifted. As if the story itself has decided it's time to let go. The stars return, and you are lying again beneath them. Only now, the earth beneath you is soft meadow. The torches distant fireflies. In the distance, a flute plays a gentle tune that's mostly rest. You exhale. The seed still rests in your hand. Warm. No one takes it away. When you sit up this time, you're no longer underground, or at a festival, or surrounded by mythic figures with ambiguous motivations and divine cheekbones. You're on a wooden deck that creaks gently beneath you. The stars above are beginning to fade. And a light breeze carries the unmistakable smell of salt. You're on a ship. Not a mighty trireme or an armada of conquest, just a cozy little merchant vessel. A lateen sail flaps lazily overhead. The deckhands are asleep. A few amphorae are lashed in place beside you, painted with scenes of dolphins, olives, and oddly enough a chicken wearing a laurel wreath. You have a warm woolen wrap over your shoulders. There's a soft mug of something near your hand. It's goat milk with a bit of honey and thyme, lukewarm, but comforting. The ship rocks gently. Like a lullaby you forgot the words to. This, it turns out, is the final leg of your journey, and the captain who nods at you from the helm is none other than Homer himself. Not the Simpsons guy, the blind bard, except, here. He's got perfect vision and a fondness for comfortable sandals. Going home? He asks you. You nod, not quite sure where home is. He smiles, eyes twinkling. You've been to Olympus, the underworld, a philosopher's wine party, and an island full of spelling-challenged sorceresses. You've earned a nap. You try to remember it all. You remember Orpheus, singing until the stones cried. You remember Dionysus, hurling vines across the stars. You remember the owl on Athena's shoulder blinking once, very slowly. You remember the garden in the underworld, the ash petals, the pomegranate seed that now glows gently in your tunic pocket like a tiny hearth fire. You've seen the strange gears of fate, the wax wings of ambition, the house parties of immortals. You've met mortals who built cities, told stories, loved and lost and snuck out back during rituals to catch their breath. And now, the sea. It stretches endlessly on all sides, but you're not afraid of it. This isn't the stormy chaos that Odysseus feared. This is the sea at the end of the tale. The kind that gently insists it's time to stop narrating and start dreaming. The sky shifts from black to deepest blue. A seagull calls once, then thinks better of it, and settles down again.
The crew slowly stirs, just a few sleepy sailors with windburnt cheeks and breakfast on their minds. No sirens, no krakens, just a steaming basket of flatbread and a slab of soft cheese passed around. You take a piece. It's warm, slightly burnt. Perfect.
As you chew slowly, Homer hums a familiar tune, a fragment of a song you didn't realize you knew. It's older than myth, older than cities. It sounds like the rhythm of oars, the hush of sandaled feet across marble, the gentle thud of a lyre being set down after a long night of storytelling. The ship begins to ease toward shore.
You climb down to the sand. It's cool beneath your feet. You look back at the ship one last time. It's already gone. The water is still. And then, at last, the quiet settles in fully. not as absence, but as fullness. A peace so gentle it hums in your bones. The myths don't end, you realize. They just pause to let you rest. And you do. Wind down, 300 words, you're still, now. The sea has faded into silence, and the fig trees sway with the breath of the night. There's no more journeying left. Not tonight. The gods are asleep, tucked into the folds of mountains and clouds. The monsters have curled up beneath their caves. Even the sun, always so eager to rise, waits patiently just below the horizon, giving you a little more time. You lie on soft earth, or maybe a bed, you can't quite tell anymore. The story has settled around you like a blanket, stitched with old names and gentle whispers. Your breathing slows, in, out, like waves lapping at the shore. No need to remember it all. The myths will still be there tomorrow. The clever riddles, the impossible labors, the clumsy gods and the clever mortals. All waiting in the wings, smiling behind their masks. Tonight, they've stepped back. Tonight, they've given you space. The pomegranate seed glows faintly in your hand one last time, then cools into something small and ordinary. A bead, a stone, a dream, even time grows quiet. You can feel it pause, just for a moment, before turning its page. And in that pause, you sleep. You drift, wrapped in olive branches and distant lyre music, dreaming not of monsters or labors, but of fig trees, sleepy goats, and the warmth of myth made gentle. Good night, traveler of tales. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.